If you eat steak and eggs, burgers, pizza, or big restaurant meals, and your blood sugar looks fine at first, finds hours later, you click the right video. Because this isn't random, and it isn't you doing something wrong. I've lived with type 1 diabetes most of my life, actually 44 years. And this exact pattern fooled me for many of those years. You bolus, you eat, everything looks calm, and then later, your CGM starts creeping up. That late rise is the problem every type 1 diabetic knows. So let me explain. This is obviously food. Let's pretend it's pizza. This is obviously an insulin pen. And this is what we think is happening when we eat that high-fat meal. Let's say pizza. Food slowly digests like this. High-fat meals, high-protein meals, and big restaurant meals, like pizza in particular, digest really slowly. They release glucose gradually over many hours. But rapid insulin works really fast. It gets into your system quickly, usually within 15-20 minutes. It peaks quite early, and then it's done. This creates two problems every type 1 recognizes. First, your insulin finishes, but your food is still digesting. So glucose keeps coming after your insulin is already gone. That's the late rise I'm talking about. That's the midnight climb. That's the why is this happening now moment, right? Second, you take your insulin, hoping it'll cover your food, but your insulin peaks way too quickly before the food has had a chance to kick in. You drop low. You treat the low, you eat again. Now you stack more food on top of a meal that was already digesting. And later, you climb even higher. That's the roller coaster. And this is why low-carb meals spike later on. That's why burgers hit at midnight when you've eaten at 8 o'clock. And why pizza wins every time, at least for me. It's not the food. It's the timing. I'll get into that in a few minutes. I'm going to share a couple things to do in order to manage these late spikes. Slow meals don't spike early. They rise late, as I've already established. So everything looks fine at first. You think you nailed it, but the insulin curve and the food curve never actually matched. You eat your food, you take your insulin goes like this, your food spikes later on. You've got this mix match happening all the time. It's not the food, it's the timing. Slow meals don't spike early. They rise late. They keep going after the insulin's already done. So everything looks fine at first. You think you've nailed it, but the insulin curve and the food curve never actually match. This took me a long time to see in my own data. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Here's the shift. Stop treating slow meals like fast meals. Slow food needs slow coverage. When you sit down to a slow meal, you plan for a long curve. You expect the late rise. You leave room to cover it. You don't dump all your insulin up front, basically. If you're on an insulin pump, that usually means splitting the dose. You take some of the insulin now, and then the rest over a period of time, 1 to 2 hours. For lower carb, protein heavy meals, the simple starting point is about half now and half over 2 hours. And then you can tweak the ratios depending on what you're eating. For high carb, high fat meals like pizza, wings, burgers, it's often more upfront with the remainder stretch out. So you test, you watch, and then you tune it for the next time. If you're on injections, it's the same idea. You take part of that insulin dose up front with the meal immediately, and then the rest a couple hours later, when digestion is actually happening with that type of meal. That's how you avoid the early low and the late high. It's not perfect science. And once you start thinking this way, slow meals stop feeling random. They become more predictable and manageable. That shift from fast insulin on slow food to matched timing is what finally made my blood sugars feel calmer, not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, just a bit more predictable and less random. So hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next video, because that's where I break down why your basal rate isn't the real problem and what actually is. If you struggle with overcorrecting highs and always seem to pay for it later, watch this one next.